Well, listen, thank you everybody for joining us so far. I reckon it's about 2 minutes past 12. So I reckon we should get started, James. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
That's good for me.
Okay. Well, listen, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. First thing I say whenever we do these events is please bear with us if there are any IT issues. Okay. I'm a middle-aged man. The last year has really brought home to me how I no longer understand the technology that we're being asked to use. So if anything goes a bit weird, bear with us. In terms of how it's going to work today, we're going to allow about 25 minutes for questions for James and I, just a bit of a chit chat. And then after that, we'd like to ask James the questions that you guys have got for him. And if you have got any questions for him, you can submit them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, okay? And what will happen is my trusty sidekick will be looking at the questions you submit, and then he'll be passing them on to me in order that I can then give them to James to discuss in the second half of today's session. Now, before we start talking about James, because that's the reason why we're all here today, just want to mention a little bit about the Campaign for Common Sense. We launched last May, and really all we're trying to do is to encourage people to be able to have nicer conversations, more sensible, less heated conversations about difficult issues, sensitive issues. And we want to do that because we believe that nobody has a monopoly on what is right and wrong. We think that we've all got probably more in common than it seems sometimes when we're arguing. We think that common sense and fair play are the best way to approach these tricky things. And we think that sensitive topics should be discussed. We should be able to do them frankly, but we should be able to do it calmly and without trading insults. And that's why we're running these webinars, because it's a chance to have a conversation with people who we think do a really, really good job of modelling that approach to difficult topics. And that brings us nicely on to James Dreyfus, who genuinely, I was saying to him before we came live on air, was a real bit of an acting hero to me as a young man. James, it might surprise you, but I never got the romantic leads in my performances at school. I got asked to be, I was the MC in Cabaret.
Me too.
Amazing. And I was Herod in Jesus Christ Superstar.
Fantastic.
And I was murderer number 2 in Macbeth as well. That was my biggest role as well.
The character roles are always the best. You don't want to play a romantic lead, you get bored.
Anyone can
Not that I know, because I've never played a romantic lead.
but Constable Goody in the Thin Blue Line back in the 90s was absolutely a really joyful character for me. And so that's probably how lots of you will remember James, mainly for his work on TV, The Thin Blue Line, Gimme, 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 My Hero, Mount Pleasant. And hopefully very soon, we'll be seeing him in Supernova, a film with Colin Firth and Stanley Tucci. And whilst we probably best know him for his acting, in recent times, he's waded into the debate that's been going on around identity politics. And he's not been afraid to advocate and put forward views which conflict sometimes with those generally held by people in the arts world, but he's done it in a really lovely way. He's done it in a way that's funny and assertive and we think quite brave. So as well as his ever-present activities on Twitter and social media, he's also been involved in trying to push back gently some of the attempts by groups like Stonewall to shut down the debate around transgender issues. And also last year, he put his name to a letter in support of J.K. Rowling during the furore that there was about comments she'd made on the issue. And indeed last month, and this is what really brought it home to me, after Russell T Davies, the brilliant writer and producer and director, said that he felt authenticity was the key requirement for characters in acting and drama today. And Russell T Davies said that he would only cast gay actors to play gay characters now. James spoke out and said that he didn't agree, but again, he did it with clarity, with humour and with confidence. So James, I'm really delighted to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. If it's okay, I'll get started on the questions now.
You're welcome. Can I just clarify one thing? I've since discovered that the comments that Russell made pertained only to how he felt about casting his own productions, and so which is entirely his prerogative. And so my thing was in no way attacking Russell T Davies. It was just making the comment that I didn't agree for it to be done wholesale.
Fantastic. Listen, and again, isn't that's classic, James, that he's taken the opportunity now to clarify things and to take on board other people's opinions. And we think we could all learn a lot from that kind of approach. So listen, so James, I'm going to kick off. I'm going to kick off with the nice, easy one that we ask all of our guests. So let's go back to your school days, okay? Looking back at school, what was your favourite subject at school, and what was your favourite part of school life?
My favourite subject. I don't really remember listening. I had some great teachers. Okay, I suppose it was English because, you know, so English literature and English language, that's what interested me. Maths, forget it. Biology, forget it. Physics, forget it completely. Nothing to do with that I ever understood. I quite enjoyed French. Latin was a big thing. We had a great Latin teacher called Derek Cannon, who also directed the plays, which moves on to the second part of your question. Yeah. He encouraged me to do acting, and so I guess my favourite part of the school was the extracurriculum activities, which was, you know, once a year we did a play and spent, you know, 2 terms sitting there thinking, oh, come on. But you know, I was lazy. I'm bone idle, to be honest with you. So, you know, I would always leave homework till the night before, and I was a typical, you know, schoolboy, more interested in doing other things than what I was supposed to be doing.
But you're saying you did enjoy, if like the acting, the extracurricular side of stuff.
Yeah, on first discovering that, it was like a realization. I was very lucky to know what I wanted to do at age was 10 or 11. The first play I ever did was The Servant of Two Masters. They recently updated it with James Corden. It's called One Man and Two Governors, but it's based on. Okay. So we did that, and then the following year we did A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was bottom in that. And then for the final year we did Oliver, which was wonderful. I was Fagin, and a well-known actor called Charlie Edwards, who's one of my best friends, played Nancy. And we thought we ruled the school by then. But
so it got you hooked. By that point, you got the bug. You'd been hooked.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Okay. And so, is that what made you want to get into acting? Like, what was it? When did you know you wanted to get into acting? And also, what's helped you stick with it? Because it's not easy to do. It's really hard.
No. Well, it's a vocation. So you make a decision to go into it. You make a decision knowing. And you know, my parents were very. Hello, Mum. I know you're watching. My parents were very eager that, you know, I got my education first, and I have to say they supported me every single step of the way, because I was adamant that's all I wanted to do, that's what I was interested in, and absolutely determined, you know, that one day I wanted to go to drama school. I particularly wanted to go to RADA, and it all sort of worked out that way, it was the driving force. I even started my own theatre company with Bertie Portal and Charlie Edwards, called Pistol Playhouse. And during the school holidays, we rented, there was a theatre called the Golden Lane Theatre, which was just, you know, that tunnel that goes towards the Guildhall and the Barbican, just off there. I think it's Golden Lane Street or something, Golden Lane. There was a theatre, an old theatre there, and we rented it for 3 nights a year.
Wow. And
we did What the Butler Saw, and we did The Creeper, and then it all went horribly wrong, and we did a show at the Hammersmith Palais, and misjudged our sketch show appallingly, that we were all booed off stage during, and I think that put paid to that venture.
Okay, so you weren't much captured by the academic side of school, but you got into the extracurricular thing. You got the bug. You got the bug for acting at a young age. You stuck at it. Now, actors are not generally known to be shy, retiring characters, are they? Personally, so what do you think has been the key to like rubbing along when you're working on a project and getting things done?
Well, I guess it's that enthusiasm for acting. Don't forget, when I was growing up, I mean, people rarely discussed politics and other things when we were rehearsing and things. All we talked about was movies and performances we'd seen and actors we loved. And back in my early days, my heroes were Gielgud and Olivier and Dame Peggy Ashcroft and Ralph Richardson, and the disguises they wore and the accents they put on, and to see Laurence Olivier in Marathon Man and then to see him in Boys of Brazil was, riveting.
Yeah.
So it was the sort of love of acting really that kept us all together. And actually, when a group of actors get together, we really are tiresome to anyone but other than actors, because all we do is talk about ourselves and what jobs we're doing. So, don't get stuck with a load of actors if you're not interested in acting, because we will bore the pants off you.
You heard it here from James. So okay, so let's start to move on now to sort of the disagreeing topics. Okay, so one of the things we're really interested in is we don't all have to agree about everything. In fact, it would be really boring if everybody agreed with everyone else about everything. So what do you think is the key to disagreeing well with people?
Well, I think the first thing is to listen, and not just to listen, but to comprehend what's being said. That seems to be the key. And I feel what's happening at the moment is, no matter what you're accused of or what your position is, and you can make it 1,000 times and you can say it over and over and over, it's met with a brick wall. It's, you've done this, therefore that. And it's absolutes. We seem to be dealing solely with absolutes at the moment. And absolutes are the language of children. I won't do this. They see things very much in black or white. And I'm just astonished at the moment that we seem to have lost the ability to realize that there is nuance and there is a whole range of things to take into account when discussing certain issues. And I think to say no debate about something it's divisive for a start, and it gets us absolutely nowhere. And look what's happened. It's descended into screaming chaos. And worse than that, it's descended into death threats and rape threats and, the most appalling things. Okay, given this is social media now I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But the level of discourse at the moment, I just think is lamentable.
And so you said that you think one of the keys to disagreeing well is to listen lots, but also to try and comprehend, to try and understand what's being said. Are there any particular people who you really admire, but who you really disagree with?
Well, that's an interesting question. That was the most interesting question, because obviously when you admire someone, you admire them because you tend to agree with them. So the two people that sprang to mind actually was Gore Vidal and William Buckley Jr., who had a famous debate during the Nixon era. And I don't particularly agree with either of them, but I deeply admired the way they. It was a debate between the two of them. I don't know if you've ever seen it. So there's a wonderful film called Best of Enemies, which shows them, and they sort of face away from each other. One sitting like this and one sitting like that, and there's a mediator in the middle called Howard. And they sort of talk. They throw sort of very erudite insults at each other over their. Well, you're this, you're that. And it doesn't matter which side you agreed with. You thought that's the way forward. Of course, it all went horribly wrong towards the end when Gore Vidal decided to call William Buckley a crypto-Nazi. and it was a very famous incident because William Buckley turned around and said, listen, you queer, you say that again, I'm going to smash you into yesterday. And suddenly the guy in the middle went, gentlemen, please, language, please, must. And that, to me, exemplifies what's happening today. It still happens now. If you disagree with someone, someone says nuts.
Yeah.
And you get nowhere, because you're then back into, what do you say to that? It's just, it's indefensible. Unless, of course, you are a real life Nazi. So I was, those two started off. Of course, I admire the work of Polanski. I disagree with what he did. I admire the chess playing abilities of Bobby Fischer. I loathe his anti-Semitism. I like the Tales of the Unexpected by Roald Dahl. I loathe his anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, no, it's funny actually, because that brings up that classic question, which we won't have time to explore today, about can you separate the art from the artist? And in fact, you know, I've got 4 young daughters, all of whom have devoured or are devouring Roald Dahl stuff. And there was that development recently, wasn't there, where his family had effectively quietly published on their website sort of an apology for his of the things he'd said and done about Jewish people.
Yeah.
And it led to a really interesting conversation with my girls at the table I'm sat at now about how do you separate, how far can you separate the work from the person? Yeah. And it is really interesting, because when I think about people who I really disagree with on stuff, but who I really admire for where they've gone about it, I'm a bit more cliche. You've had much more interesting examples, but the example I always go to is Tony Benn, you know, the politician.
Yes.
Who and maybe it's easier, maybe it was easier for me to feel like that because he never got to put into action what he wanted to, but he was very compelling in the way he could put his things across. But I actually got to see him do some debates as a teenager, and he was just mind-blowingly coherent, even though I didn't agree with what he was saying, and so respectful of the other people that were taking a different stance.
Yes, he was. It's interesting you mentioned Tony Benn, because he was the other one I was going to mention. And I was also going to mention John Smith, who I thought was the best leader this country's never had. I thought he was a man of integrity, of decency, and they're rare. They're rare. But I totally agree with you about Tony Benn. Yeah.
Now, listen, in terms of let's moving on now. So when you commented on some of the comments that Russell T Davies made, you used the hashtag in one of your tweets, keep ID politics out of the arts.
Yes.
And that's what really jumped out at me, because I thought that's a really bold statement to say, because generally speaking, obviously there is a wide range of opinion within the arts world, but generally speaking, the arts world is quite pro identity politics and the stuff that goes around that. So why do you think we should keep ID politics out of the arts? And do you think it's actually possible to do that now?
Well, I think it's important to keep ID politics out of the arts, because what it tends to do is have a limiting, an extremely limiting and destructive effect, because then you begin to sort of, and we see it happening now, we begin to have warnings on things, and we begin to, people demand representation for this, and then we start saying, well, you know, do disabled people only play disabled characters? Do gay people only play gay characters? Well, what about us bisexuals? If you're going to do that, then bisexuals should only play bisexuals. And, you know, it's sort of, it'll spread. And I just feel it totally negates what acting is about, where one is able to play anything. Of course, I'm not talking about blacking up and being offensive. I'm not talking about doing a silly foreign accent any longer. You know, let's say Alec Guinness in The Passage to India. I'm not talking about that anymore. But I'm talking about, you know, let's say, for example, Eddie Redmayne playing Stephen Hawking. Now, how would you show from when he was a young man growing up and show the debilitating nature of the disease, unless you were able to physically do it? Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Foot. You know, this was not an insult to disabled people. He did it incredibly and took it very, very seriously. I just think it's a dangerous path to go down, because it'll end up stifling freedom of expression. It'll end up damaging the arts, and ultimately, if authenticity is what one is going for, then hire a coal miner to play a coal miner. You know, the whole point of acting is that's what you learn to do, is inhabit somebody entirely different to yourself, or at least character acting. If you're talking about representation, well, again, that's a nonsense. I mean, I don't think people realize that the acting community is full of gay people and full of bisexual people and full of transsexual people who, you know, there's much more room to go for transsexual characters. But I don't believe solely transsexual people can play. Again, to use Eddie Redmayne, there was a film he made where he did play a transsexual. I think everyone should be able to play whatever they can. I mean, half the fun was putting on a fake nose and an old man's wig and pretending to be older than you are. I just think it's a dangerous area.
And you also, like, I think one of the comments you made in response to the Russell T Davies stuff was it's about, not about so much authenticity, but about being convincing. That's the purpose of acting, is it? To convince people, to suck them into that false reality and make it seem real. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the film that I just did. This is why I was compelled to speak up about it, because I kind of felt I'd just done something which was a perfect example of being the opposite. I was in a film with Colin Firth and Stanley Tucci playing a middle-aged gay couple, one who has a debilitating illness and it's sad by the other one. Now, I watched this film astonished by their performances, and no one could sit through that film and say to me, if you didn't know who they were, you'd completely believe they were a gay couple. You know, and what does acting gay mean? Acting gay doesn't mean anything. Unless you're talking about acting camp. Okay, well, anyone can play camp. Kevin Allen, the actor who's in The Thin Blue Line with me, does the best camp person I've ever seen. So it just seems to me that when you start sort of putting authenticity, and also the authenticity thing about It's a Sin doesn't really work, because these kids who acted so brilliantly in it, they weren't around in the AIDS crisis, so they're acting as if they know about it. So that's my point. It's not attacking. It's not about attacking anyone. It's just about stepping back and going, well, what is acting about?
No, that's a really, thank you. That's a really helpful, compelling insight into, you know, the kind of points that you've been making. So you've spoken about the importance of, you know, convincing over authenticity and ID politics. You also waded in on the transgender issue, didn't you?
No, the transgender issue waded in on me.
So why did you? It would have been so much easier to stay out of it. What? How did it wade in on you? What spurred you on to speak out?
Well, what happened was I came to the defence of an actor online who was getting piled on, and who's since disappeared from the debate, incidentally. And I could see these messages weren't coming from transsexual people. They were coming from radical activists. And all I saw was rampant misogyny and hatred. And I stepped in and, you know, sort of said something. And then Graham Linehan got in touch with me. And Graham Linehan was an old friend of mine. In fact, one of my first jobs, I worked for him on his sitcom Paris. Him and Arthur Matthews wrote a sitcom with Alexei Sayle and Neil Morrissey. And he said, and Graham slowly, you know, was asking me questions, and I said, well, you know, obviously, and explained things to me, and said, just, you know, go out and have a look. So I went out and had a look online myself, and what I came across was just astonishing. These radical activists wishing death and posting pictures of guns and knives and things, and I thought, I've never seen this before. I've never seen this level of hatred and division. And so I'm just the type of person that when I see injustice, it makes me boil. It's the same with animal cruelty. It just makes something in me boil. So I couldn't have kept quiet about it even if I wanted to. So here we are.
So,
and it's a subject that you can't just dip your toe into, because once you dip your toe in, you're fully immersed.
Yes.
You can't go back.
And now that you have been sucked in to this issue and the campaigning around it, if you like, and you can't go back, what would you like to achieve? What would be a good outcome for us as a society?
I think the best outcome out of all of this would be to listen to women, listen to what they're saying, stop putting them down, stop threatening them with rape, stop threatening them with death, stop trying to put them back in their place in these people's eyes. That's the biggest lesson we should learn. We're regressing because we were there at one point. We were getting there, and we're going backwards. And that's the most important thing I'd like to see out of this.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually, because the other thing I'm concerned about, and maybe it's me sort of, I was a teacher for 15 years and I'm never going to be able to quite take that coat off, as it were. But my other worry is that with this issue, along with many other issues, the debate actually sets the cause back further. So it doesn't just undermine women's. My concern is for trans rights and trans lives being undermined, because it potentially will cause a backlash.
This is also another worry. All my trans friends, and I have trans friends online and in real life, I grew up with transsexual people. We danced together, we drank together. There was none of this division. There was none of it. There was none of this having to label everything. And they're all horrified of what's going on and embarrassed about it. And it's not doing their cause any good at all, because these people do not speak for anybody but themselves. Nobody. And they're not transsexual people who are doing this. It's guys in a skirt and a wig, and their misogyny is showing. It's showing. And to do this to women, to threaten them, and the things I see every day, and I get threats sent to me. And women are basically going, please listen to us.
Yeah.
And it's the age-old problem of no, we won't listen.
So, listen, thank you so much for those insights. If it's okay, we're going to start taking some questions from the people watching today. So, James, the first question I've got for you here, this is from an anonymous person. Do you fear being cancelled as a result of you expressing your views?
Well, I think I have been cancelled, haven't I? Oh. I mean, I was erased from Big Finish. I used to play the master on that, and behind my back they erased me from that. I'm sure, I wouldn't know because I haven't heard, but I'm sure I've been cancelled already.
Gosh, and so there have been roles, if you like, or jobs that you've no longer got. Do you think there've been other roles you're being overlooked because of stuff you said?
Yeah, I'm sure.
And how do you think we challenge that? Do you think it's possible to challenge that kind of stuff, or do you think it's just a price we have to pay?
Until the wheels of change start happening, you see, I'm not very hopeful. I think things will get worse before they get better. But exposing, I mean, I'm all in favor of letting these people keep talking, because the more they keep talking, the more they keep exposing themselves. Yeah. And I think people will see that this is nothing to do with, people who generally have gender dysphoria and genuinely have to transition and feel the need. And I think they'll see these are not who we're talking about. This is not the problem. This is not the problem. Yeah. There's a subset of these anarchists, angry young people who somehow have this unbelievable hatred for women and what they represent. I mean, this word WOMXN, even some so-called feminists are using it. What is that? And why isn't the same thing happening to men? I just see it get. I see it as a big boil, growing and growing and growing, and one day it will burst, but I don't know when.
Yeah.
I thought you'd frozen there for a second.
No. So I was reflecting before.
I thought, oh no.
No, listen, so here's another question for you then. So I want to read this out. It's a really good question. If figures in the arts suppress, political ideas or views because they're worried about their reputations being damaged, how can we ever get the sector to move beyond it then? If people like you are being cancelled, other people, how do we get past it?
I don't know.
What's it going to take to burst that boil?
I don't know. I think we're in a unique position here though, at the moment, because don't forget we're a year into this COVID thing. Yeah. Jobs are so scarce, it's unbelievable. So I don't think the timing helps particularly because people are frightened, and rightly so, because you speak out. It only takes one person on Twitter to call the agent and say, I accuse them of this. I mean, it is like being back in, as I wrote the other day, back in Salem. I accused you, Goody Dreyfus, of being this, that, and the other, and you're tried and executed before you've had a chance to say, but I didn't say that. I've never said that. I wouldn't even think that. This is where we are, but I think we're in a unique situation. And also, I think people have seen, the hatred and misrepresentation directed towards J.K. Rowling, who wrote an eminently compassionate and reasonable riposte to these accusations. I think they looked and saw what happened. If that can happen to her, it can happen to anybody. And that's what we have to start, this cancel culture, which people say, it doesn't exist. It's very real. It's happening every day. And you only have to look at the news to see it.
Well, in fact, we've actually had 2 cases in the last 24 hours, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
The chairman of KPMG have to resign for different, but also Gina, I'm probably going to say her name on Gina Carano on The Mandalorian. And that, honestly, my girls flipping love The Mandalorian. They love the new styles. Really strong female role models. They've done a fantastic job there. And then because she said something that was probably in bad taste, I think it's fair to say, but from a right-wing perspective, she's lost her role, hasn't she, Mandalorian?
Yes, I'm not aware of what she's. I read one of the things when she said neighbours of Jews beat them up in the streets, which is actually factually correct. There were a lot of neighbours who did that. So I'm not aware of what she said.
I think she made my understanding, she made some pretty tasteless comparisons about being right wing and it being similar to being Jewish under a Nazi regime.
I didn't. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
But again, it's something about, can you separate the art from the artist? But also, would that same reaction have happened if it was the other way around, politically leaning, as it were?
Well, let's remember Vanessa Redgrave's speech when she won her Oscar, where she denounced the Zionist cause, and boos went across the auditorium, if you remember. And I think work for her was a bit tricky after that. I mean, it's just the fact that, we now have a platform where everyone has an opinion, and anyone, it doesn't matter who they are, anonymously, can form a cabal with another group of people and complain loudly enough. What I don't understand is the immediate capitulation that happens. Instead of turning around and going, for goodness sake, she didn't say that, she didn't mean it, do pipe down. They immediately fold. Innocent, Kiva. I mean, these companies, did they bother to check whether what was accused was true? No, they just went, thanks for that, we'll cancel them.
It's really interesting you brought up the point about lockdown, because I've been wondering whether a lot of the intensity of emotion and anger that we're seeing it's a bit like in a horror movie, isn't it, right now? And often in horror movies, as they go through the film, the characters turn on one another, don't they? As they get more fearful. Then you get to the end of the horror movie, and those that have survived, if you like, they have to kind of forget everything they've done, don't they? And all the nastiness they've shown toward one another. in order that they can try and reform their friendships and move on. Like,
Yeah.
do you think we've got a chance, even if people have maybe gone over the top or gone too far because of the lockdown and the emotions and fear with it? Do you think we will be able to piece it back together?
Yeah, I do, because I believe things are cyclical. I mean, I believe, you just have to look at a bit of history, and things tend to be cyclical, and we're just in the middle of a really, really nasty phase at the moment. I mean, you only have to think about, it was vaxxers against anti-vaxxers, Brexit against non-Brexit, Trump versus Biden. I mean, everything has become so polarized that the bubble will burst and it will go. So I do have hope, but I do, as these people in Silicon Valley have a lot to answer for.
Because you think social media is driving the debate in that particular direction?
Well, I think social media is behaving abominably. Yeah, it's influencing politics. It's shutting down voices they don't agree with. Every single day I see feminist accounts disappearing for stating biology, scientific fact. They get closed down. And today I saw a openly paedophile account with openly paedophile pictures, still up, still doing its thing. And you think to yourself, really, where is your moral compass? What is going on?
So do you think that the tech companies should be doing more policing then, or do you think they should be policing less, or do you think they should be policing differently? What do you think is the way through for this then?
You see, I don't know. I mean, I really can't answer that question, because I'm for. I don't think that would be possible. They all have an agenda. Is there such thing as a free speech platform anymore? I don't know. One might say it's free speech, and then it attracts. The trouble is, it tends to attract extremists from both sides. And of course, one will get swamped with the hard left, and one will get swamped with the hard right, and then of course they'll blame each other. Those platforms. So I don't know. I don't know how you work your way out of this. I mean, social media platforms are the monster we've created, the untested experiment, and we're currently living through the consequences of it. And I don't quite know where you go from here.
So if we look, just change tack for a minute now. So a few people have asked actually a very similar question, and it's put me in mind of a really sad article I saw Matthew Paris write in the Times not long ago about Stonewall. So I believe Matthew Paris was involved with Stonewall in the early days.
Yes, he was.
And actually Stonewall really were, and you'll understand why I'm saying this, they were, if you like, they helped to make gay rights campaign groups acceptable, didn't they, in the mainstream? They did a brilliant job there.
Yes.
And yet in the last 5-6 years, Stonewall have really adopted the trans agenda. And the question that's come through from, I can see 2 or 3 people now, why do you think the trans rights agenda has become so entwined with the, if you like, the gay rights agenda, and why do you think that's happened, given the inherent tensions that are in there?
Well, I mean, it's good. It's really good that Stonewall was standing up for trans rights. Totally for that. I think everyone was. We all stand together. But what's happened now? We reached. I remember doing the equality show at the Albert Hall for Stonewall, and we were marching for equality. Well, we got equality. We got our rights. In this country, trans people also have their rights. So I don't know. I don't know what their agenda is, but there's something very strange about an LGBT organization that is now getting sued by a lesbian. There's something nefarious going on somewhere. I don't know. Follow the money, perhaps. I don't know what their agenda is, but I certainly know that they're turning their backs on gay people and lesbians and women in particular, and a lot of people there's going to be a reckoning at some point. And with their stance on no debate, I mean, they were all about debate before. You know, but the Stonewall of today was not the Stonewall of yesterday. To me, it's unrecognisable.
That's exactly the point that Matthew Parris and others have made, isn't it? And what I think's really struck me, albeit white, middle-aged, straight guy looking on, is how emotional a lot of people who are involved with Stonewall over the years feel about how it's gone, and the fact that it's not just that Stonewall's left them behind; they feel they've had to leave Stonewall behind, an organisation they were really proud of.
Yes, yes.
Do you think there's a way back for Stonewall?
What?
Do you think there's a way back for Stonewall? Do you think it can regain?
No, I don't. I don't. I think this. I think they dug their own grave. I mean, to accuse the LBG Alliance, which is as a hate group, is perhaps the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Back in the day, were men-only gay clubs, were they a hate group? Is the trans only groups now, are they a hate group for excluding lesbians and gay men? Is women meeting together, are they a hate group now? I mean, this is all designed to shut down debate. And if you know Bev and Kate from and Malcolm from the Alliance, you will see it's patently untrue. They are saying that lesbian, gays and bisexuals have a very different needs. And sometimes we want to get to, I've never known more lunacy than 4 people meeting on a Zoom meeting to talk about gay issues to be labelled a hate group. This is just ludicrous. What about will they come for the lesbian chess club next? Going in someone's house, and a group of lesbians playing chess. It's not of course one should be inclusive and include people, but it's the notion of forcing people to be inclusive is a very different thing entirely.
And lesbian chess club sounds like a good name for the next Richard Curtis movie, or maybe you could.
It does.
Maybe you could have a role in that. That'd be amazing.
Well, if only I was a lesbian.
Well, you'd be allowed to. You'd be allowed to.
I don't know. Would I be allowed to play a lesbian? I'm not sure.
Maybe you could play the queen on the chess.
I could play the resident queen.
So we're going to take a slightly different topic on the next question. It's a really good one, actually. It's still about diversity, but basically, this is a question from Michael. He says, "How could we create a greater diversity of people coming into the arts? So we see more writers and performers from from maybe a conservative or centre-right background, or from a different, philosophical viewpoint to the one we have. How do we get greater diversity of opinion into the arts?"
Oh, well, that's a good idea. Well, I mean, the arts it's always tended to be, on the left and everything. I mean, and that was fine. But there is no alternative at the moment. There just isn't. A right-wing play. I mean, I don't know. Have you ever seen one?
Well, it's funny. We did a report before Christmas on comedy at the BBC, where we looked at all the comedians that got slots on the BBC. It was in the month of November, I think, and then we tried to hunt down whether they made any public opinion on Brexit or politics and stuff like that. And over 3/4 of the comedians that were on the BBC that month had expressed left-wing or sort of anti-Brexit type views, and we could only find 2 people that had been on the BBC that month who were even vaguely conservative, one of which was the lovely Giles Brandreth, which thank goodness he was there. He's a national treasure. But I think more broadly across the arts, there is an issue, isn't there, about the viewpoint. It's not just about the identity politics stuff you've said, it's politically.
I mean, that's patently obvious to anyone, I think, who watches the BBC. I mean, it's almost become like a standing joke. I mean, now it's because it's so obvious and it's so blatant. But I think we're seeing I think we're going to see an emergence of. There's a wonderful comedy club called Comedy Unleashed, which is based in Bethnal Green, and that does stand up, and it covers all. There are left-wing comics, there are centrist comics. Not hard left, not hard right, but sort of left of centre, right of centre, offering different viewpoints. I think you're going to see a sort of backlash against this. But the trouble is, is getting on television is an entirely different thing, because if the powers that be decide they don't want you, they don't want you.
Well, what was really interesting, it happened that the day after we put our report out on comedy. For those of you watching, it's available on our website. It's only about 8 pages long, so it's a nice quick read. But the day after we put that report out, the BBC announced a whole load of bursaries and initiatives to try and increase diversity in comedy. And that was really good. They had one for young performers. They had one for performers from minority ethnic backgrounds. They had one to get more women in. But there was nothing in there about viewpoint, diversity of viewpoint or experience. And I think that is a big challenge for the arts, particularly as increasingly it's hard to break into the arts, whatever bit of the arts is, unless you come from quite a wealthy background, don't you? Because there's not the support there used to be. So unless you've got wealthy parents that you can kind of like look after you or subsidise in the early years of your career, it's quite hard to break through, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know about now. I mean, we're going back to the 80s, the mid 80s, when I went to training, where there was support, and there were bursaries and there were grants. Now, I simply don't know, but I'm assuming that there aren't. So I'm assuming you're right about this.
So coming back to the thing about these angry, loud, divisive debates, do you think that politicians have a role in addressing these issues and making debates better, or do you think it's going to have to come from like the general public?
Ooh, I think the general public are getting fed up. I think the silent majority might not be silent for that much longer. Just from what I observe every day. I mean, and also let's not forget that we're still dealing with a generation that grew up with, with these. And these aren't telephones. These are personal computers with access to everything that you carry around and you spend your life with. And these are the most important things in a certain generation's personal life. We've never had this before. We've never been down this road before. So it is an experiment. And perhaps now we are seeing the results of spending your life learning from this, which is a million different opinions and a million different experts and a million different things. And it's also a very narcissistic thing, the age of the selfie. Before, who took pictures of themselves? Nobody. You just didn't do it. You couldn't do it. Just held it like that. but it's an untried experiment, and who knows? Maybe the anger comes from thinking you know it all.
Well, it's really interesting that you sort of you make the fact that like everything you could ever want to know is on here, but of course it is so you can curate it so easily to see just what you want to see.
Yes.
That whereas maybe in the past when we had mass media rather than personalised media, we were exposed to a lot more different ideas, weren't we? Because if you turned on the telly, you had to watch whatever there was. Yes. So maybe we were exposed more to different ideas that we agreed or didn't agree with in the past. Whereas with this, you can just follow the people you like, or subscribe to the issues that you care about. Maybe we don't get exposed to the diversity of things and experiences.
Well, you see, I was thinking about this last night. I yearn for the days where the newsreaders read the news. It was factual. It was this, instead of an eye lift and a tone, or you can see their opinions shining through. And I really long for the day when the news was just news.
Yeah.
And things were given in a sort of factual way. But you're right. This is your own personal echo chamber. And of course, if you only talk into an echo chamber, you become more convinced you're right and that everyone else is wrong, because all you get is people saying yes to you. It's rather like some big Hollywood stars, who don't understand the world because no one ever says no. I think that's one of the things at the moment is the word no equates to you hate me.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean anyone hates you. It just means no.
Just means they disagree or they've got a different view.
Well, I disagree with you. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. and that's really important, isn't it? And actually, that is perfect, because the next question I wanted to come to is, how do you think we can, as individuals and as a society, disagree better? How do you think we're going to turn this round?
I don't know.
Oh,
That was the question.
Come on, James, solve society's problems for us, please.
Awful time with that question, because I thought, oh God, I don't know. Where do we go? I mean, technology is going to keep evolving. I'm sure in 5 years' time, as it evolves so quickly these days, this will be laughable, and it'll be something else entirely. So I think we're in the hands of, Silicon Valley at the moment, as far as communication is concerned. And God knows what they're going to bring out, and God knows where it's going to go and what effect it's going to have. Like I said, it's an experimental phase that we're going through, and I don't think the discourse is going to go back to what we once had. I think
Are you feeling optimistic about how things go on these things, or are you still concerned? Are you pessimistic?
I'm not feeling optimistic at all.
Right.
I hate to say that. I mean, I'm not an optimist by nature anyway. I tend to be a glass half empty, then I'll get less depressed when I'm proven correct. If I expect something to work out and it doesn't, I'll be, very depressed. So, but I just literally can't see a way out of this at the moment.
Okay.
Other than begging people, to discuss and to be anti no debate. Debate, but sit round a table and debate, discuss, disagree. I don't know of two people alive who agree on everything on this planet. It doesn't happen. I follow Corbynistas. I follow right-wing pundits on this, and everyone in between, because I want to know what everyone is saying. No point just being with people who agree with you.
Yeah, and that's genuine diversity, isn't it? Genuine diversity is being exposed to different people with different ideas, different backgrounds, different characteristics. So it is quite fun, isn't it, that a very movement that claims it's about diversity and embracing that seems to be the same kind of movement that has a very narrow view as to what diversity actually is, isn't it? It's diversity of what you look like, who you fall in love with, if you like, but no diversity at all in terms of values or views, which is traditionally completely upside down.
But even who you fall in love with and what you look like is being policed at the moment. Even that is being policed. Women are being told, unless you find me attractive, it means you're anti-me, and it's like, no, I have a physical type. I like certain. I mean, this is infesting everything else that's going on at the moment. So it's not just diversity of opinion.
Okay. Well, that really is depressing. Well, thank you so much. I think that's a really interesting take on things. So
does it sound controversial to you what I'm saying?
No. I think your analysis is, James. I think you've done a really good job of what actors are meant to do, which is to take a story and communicate it in a convincing manner. I think you summed up a lot of the problems we're facing really, really coherently and in a compelling fashion. Maybe I tend to be an optimist in that I think things will probably get worse before they get better.
Before they get better.
Yeah.
I mean, I do agree with you on, but being a sort of pessimistic person, that it's the bit of going worse before you get better that I'm sort of dreading. But I think you're right. I do think it will eventually get better.
Because in the end, what we know about most radical movements through history, like over time, who is it that said people are small c conservative about the things they actually know about? We tend to want to have a quiet life, look after our loved ones, look after our friends, have a beautiful society where people can get on with one another. Radicals want to rip it all up and believe that they can make the world perfect. And even if you just look at the 20th century, every radical movement has ended up failing because it ends up turning on itself, whether it's Mao's China, Soviet Russia, the 1968, the Soissons-Witters, the radical Black rights movement, you know, in the
Yeah.
60s and 70s, they tend to turn on themselves and lose support because they're overreach.
Yes.
And I think that probably the trans rights activists have overreached now and upset people and undermine their cause. But the sad thing is, until that overreach happens, a lot of people get hurt and a lot of people get damaged. And
absolutely, and that's my concern. You know, at the moment, transsexuals are being damaged. People with gender dysphoria are being damaged. Women are being damaged. You know, the gay rights is being eroded. Support is going. But you're right. I think eventually, once we get over a hump, things will get better. And also, once we come out of this madness, now maybe people will just feel a bit more.
I think so. Maybe what we need to do is we need to book another chat in a couple of years' time, and then we'll see where we've got
check
to.
in.
Yeah, we'll see what the phones look like. We'll see what the phones look like. See whether they've turned into something else. So, final question from me.
Chip in here.
Final question from me. Nothing to do with you know, campaigning and disagreeing. But I've got to ask you this question. You're an actor. If you could wave a magic wand, okay, and put together a production of your dreams, what would it be? What would your role be, and who would you want to have in it? Go on, just to wrap us up.
Okay. I thought about this long and hard. I'd want to put Ken Russell's film version of Tommy on stage, and I'd want Keith Allen to play Oliver Reed's part, Francis Barber to play Nora, Bill Nighy to play the Doctor, Tommy to be played by Fra Fee, Richard Fleeshman to play Cousin Kevin, Clive Rowe as the preacher, Scarlett Strallen as the Acid Queen, and Mark Benton as Uncle Ernie. Now, that doesn't leave a part for me, but you see, I'd be directing it.
Right, perfect. That is absolutely amazing. And as a massive Who fan, and I spent far too many hours in my teens learning the guitar parts of that, I'm really excited. So if you're going to be directing, if you need anyone to come do the music, I would love to play the guitar part of that. Listen, James, thank you so much for taking time out today. You've been a lot of fun. I think everyone watching this will agree. You know, we know that online you say what you think, but you say it with affection and respect. And I think that's exactly how you've approached it today. So thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Take it up. And for everyone that's been watching today, thank you so much for listening. We will put this up online later on today. We'll take James's most controversial comments. We'll edit it to make it look like he said something really outrageous. In order that we can get it properly
please don't get me into more trouble.
No,
anything that you think might cause the TRAs to attack me, just snip it out, please. I want a quiet day.
So listen, James, thank you everyone for joining us. Listen, watch this space, everybody. We'll be doing some more events like this in the future. Thank you for your time. Have a lovely weekend. And James, this is the slightly awkward bit where I'm going to end the meeting, and there's that weird bit where we're staring at the camera whilst we say goodbye. So goodbye, James. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.